When the Mental Capacity Amendment Bill was going through Parliament last year, one of the issues for the House of Commons and the House of Lords was whether or not to try and define in a statute what is actually a deprivation of liberty. Because at the moment, under the Mental Capacity Act, all it basically says is that it has the same meaning as in Article 5 of the European Convention. And it's therefore left to judges and case law to describe what a deprivation of liberty means. And so when the bill was going through Parliament, a number of suggestions were made as to what a deprivation of liberty should be defined as. There was a lot of parliamentary debate about the issue. And ultimately, they decided not to define it in legislation and leave it to what we have at the moment. In other words, leave it to case law to determine where the line is to be drawn between restricting someone's liberty and depriving it. And so because it's not defined in legislation, the Supreme Court decision in Cheshire West from March 2014 will still be the leading authority as to when someone's liberty is deprived. There are three elements to a deprivation of liberty. The first looks at confinement. So we are looking at whether the person is under continuous supervision and control and not free to leave to live elsewhere. That's known as the objective element. The second element looks at consent. So is there a lack of valid consent? Now, if someone has advanced dementia and is unable to decide where to live to receive care, then obviously by definition they cannot consent. You can only agree to something in law if you have the capacity to reach that decision. And then the third element is whether the state is somehow responsible for what's going on. And that can either be because they're commissioning the care arrangements or simply because they know what's going on. And you need all three of those elements to be present for a deprivation of liberty to occur. And so not having a statutory definition, personally, I think is a good thing because these cases are incredibly fact sensitive. And it's very difficult to define a European law concept because ultimately we have to look to the Strasbourg court for guidance as to what a deprivation of liberty actually consists of. And so what we will probably find later on in 2020 is that a code of practice will be produced that will give us a steer, at least in terms of what the government thinks is a deprivation and what isn't. And I think one of the areas we need a steer, we need some guidance, and families in particular need guidance, are those sorts of circumstances where people are living in their own homes and one has dementia.